This week's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Delos 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash.
This week on the 1044, how do shippers view the state of the supply chain in 2022?
Hey everybody, and welcome to the 1044, a weekly webisode from the editors here at CCJ. I'm Jason Cannon, and my co-host on the other side is Matt Cole. 2021 was a good year for trucking companies in terms of freight rates, and 2022 seems to be following on that same path so far. On the other side of the equation, though, are shippers, and they're facing a number of challenges in the current freight environment.
Averitt Express, the number 30 fleet in the CCJ Top 250, surveys its shipper customers each year to gauge the biggest challenges they face and to better understand what challenges they face in the year ahead. We spoke with Kent Williams, Averitt's Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing, who talked through the results of the company's 7th annual State of the North American Supply Chain Survey.
The survey is intended just for us to reach out and get a pulse of our shippers in a way in which we can really gather the data. I mean, we try to do that every day as we interact with them. Certainly drivers bring us feedback. Our customer service team always has feedback for us. Certainly our sales folks do. We have, 5 service units, and each of those service units has contact with the customers. But the survey just kind of formalizes that a bit more, gives us some more data that we can extrapolate and really help us prepare for the coming year, which is why we do it. We want to make sure that if we're investing in technology assets, so we look at our staffing plans as it relates to our 5 service units, where do we feel like the most demand will be? Is our CapEx budget adequate, or based upon what we see from the survey, should we consider, adding to it or possibly taking from it? And the shipper survey has been pretty accurate as far as we get kind of a good feel for what's coming on. Obviously, there can be events such as pandemics that come out of nowhere that can change some of that, but it's generally good information for us.
Many of the challenges that shippers ID'd as being problematic in 2021 have only gotten worse as 2022 begins to unfold.
Well, of course, the survey was actually completed, I believe, in October. So the challenges that they identified have only gotten worse since then, or have they gotten more complex since then. So, but the shippers, it's probably no surprise. They express challenges finding capacity. From their perspective, they express challenges, or shall I say concern, with rising rates across all modes. And this isn't just as it relates to us, this is across all modes. Obviously ocean carriers, the ocean cargo would be the biggest component of that, but they expressed concerns with that. Again, the capacity was huge. And certainly, I think they expressed some concerns with some of the service delays they saw, whether that be on the ocean segment, getting it through the ports, congestion and capacity constraints in the truckload sector or LTL sector. So they saw all those challenges. Of course, we had a series of questions asking them to kind of rank, what was the most, what challenges, I guess, were the greatest pain points for them as an individual shipper. And then we asked them to kind of give us a peek into their window for 2022. Do they expect capacity to ease or to become even more constrained? Do they expect to use different modes of transportation that maybe they've used in times previous? What do they expect freight rates to do? As you might expect, they struggle with capacity. They view that. I want to say 76% of our customers feel like that they will have, that their freight rates will increase next year, and I believe 77% felt like capacity constraints would even be greater in 2022 than it was in 2021. So no real surprise there. I think they certainly see what's going on in the marketplace, but those are their concerns. How can I get my inventory in? How can I get my product to my customers? What's going to be the effect on my transportation budget?
Given Averitt's different business segments, the survey asked shippers about LTL challenges, truckload challenges, and more. In the LTL and truckload segments, survey respondents mostly expected to see rates continue to climb in 2022. But before we hear more from Kent, let's hear from 1044 sponsor Chevron Lubricants.
Protecting your diesel engine and its after-treatment system has traditionally been a double-edged sword. The same engine oil that is so essential to protecting your engine's internal parts is also responsible for 90% of the ash that is clogging up your DPF and upping your fuel and maintenance costs. Outdated industry thinking still sees a trade-off between engine and emission system protection, and Chevron was tired of it. So they spent a decade of R&D developing a no-compromise formulation. Chevron Lubricants developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by a whopping 60%, which reduces the rate of DPF clogging and extends DPF service life by 2.5 times. And just think what you can do with all the MPGs you're going to add from cutting your number of regens. But Delo 600 ADF isn't just about aftertreatment. It provides complete protection, extending drain intervals by preventing oil breakdown. Before, you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system, and now you don't. 600 ADF from Delo with OmniMax technology, it's time to kick some ash.
Again, I'm going to be somewhat repetitive as we move through the segments, but they saw their costs increase. They largely saw their service levels decline. Now, I will say, and I'm admittedly biased since this is where I work every day, but I think we met our expectations as well as anybody in the marketplace. We, fortunately, with having 5 verticals or service units, if you will, we were able to pull some drivers for some other service units as needed. I think we've got a very, very creative and flexible approach as it relates to attracting drivers and hiring drivers. And we never had to embargo freight except for just a little bit in certain markets with the ice storm in Texas last year. But we were able to continue to bring on our customers' freight where we know some of our competitors said no more freight to South Florida or certain areas, and we were able to avoid all of that. And we did not hit the normal extremely high service standards that we typically set for ourselves as our own KPIs, but I really think we did a good job. We never had any periods of sustained backlogs. When we found pinch points, we were able to surge drivers in from either other service centers who had some surplus staffing, or another business unit was able to come in and help them out. We diverted supply chain and truckload drivers to help with dray in the ports where we obviously saw a lot of pressure there. So we were able to kind of stay ahead of it. Moving off service, I think the LTL customers did expect and realize price increases last year. And some of that was just really none of the carriers had the drivers that we needed, nor did we have the equipment we needed. And we certainly saw our costs continue to increase. So obviously, a lot of that was unfortunately passed on to our customers, but it was just, all hands on deck to trying to get the people and the assets we needed to get the job done. I mean, LTL was a proverbial 5-gallon bucket with 5.5 gallons of water in it, not only at Averitt, but I believe everybody in the industry as well.
Finding capacity was another pain point Averitt shipping customers identified in the survey, and Ken explains that the driver shortage played a big role in that area. He also mentions ways that Averitt has tried to combat the driver availability issues, especially in the over-the-road truckload segment.
The supply chain backlog was what made the national news. But for those of us who are in the industry, we've known that the driver shortage, it's been a headwind that's been coming for a long time. And quite frankly, when I first started hearing this, 8-9 years ago, I thought, whatever, a good company can always find drivers. But truly, it has emerged as one of the greatest potential headwinds that we and all of our competitors face. I mean, the industry, I believe, is 80,000 drivers short of what we need. COVID had a bad and significant impact on that. Not only, drivers getting sick, what people don't realize is when COVID first hit, every company, ours included, when our customers were shutting down for weeks at a time, we had to furlough drivers. All companies did. And when we did, some older drivers elected not to return to the workforce. They just said, oh, you know what, I'll just go ahead and retire. And then all training activity had to stop. You couldn't do in-cab training for both the schools as well as in-house stuff. And so that stopped. Well, then the other thing that came in is the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse has had a big impact. And we know that's a good thing for the industry, but bottom line is it's taken about 100,000 drivers or more out of the industry that were previously driving, because obviously now if a person has a positive drug test, every potential employer is now notified of that. So that was another big thing. On the over-the-road, the truckload side, we do a couple of things that I think are unique. One is because we do have five service units, and really all but 2, the drivers are basically home every single night. They're out and back same day. And the 2 we do have, which would be, of course, our truckload as well as our dedicated, and a lot of the dedicated guys are actually home every night. but some of those are over the road. So we've done a couple of things. One is we've intentionally tried to steer away from opportunities that took our drivers out of the core of our network, which is primarily the southeast, southwest, because we really do a better job of taking care of them when they're in our network. We have our infrastructure built. We have our driver support centers, secure lots, parking. We can communicate with them a lot better. Support centers will have, places where they can exercise, TVs, laundry, all those things. And we don't have that if they're in Seattle, Washington, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, or whatever. So, when there's more opportunities out there than we can handle, obviously keeping it in our core helps. The other thing that's really had an impact is we've been working on what we call just a general shift in the truckload model for years, where we're looking at more of a relay, where, for instance, instead of a driver picking up a load in Atlanta, Georgia, driving it all the way to Dallas, Texas, and delivering it, then, obviously taking his hours along the way, taking his hours in Dallas to get his rest, and then returning wherever, maybe not Atlanta, maybe to Omaha, Nebraska. We're setting up relay centers where that driver would pick it up in Atlanta, say drive maybe slightly west of Birmingham, Alabama. We've established some relay points. If we don't have a facility in the area, we've established secure parking. The driver would then meet another driver, possibly a Dallas-based driver, who would take it back and deliver it. Or if when he came back, perhaps he didn't have hours to match up with the appointment, he might drop that load, and we have a first and final mile driver who might deliver it, and we allow him get his rest and get on another load. And in some cases, maybe right back in the same lane. So we're doing that in several areas, and that's proving to be very successful. Not all drivers want to be home every night. Some really enjoy the freedom of getting out there on the road and being out, for a week at a time. We try not to have any of our drivers out for more than a week at a time. That's the goal, get them home every weekend. But with this new model, we believe we can have a lot of traditional truckload drivers, over-the-road truckload drivers, home every night, or every other night. So it's exciting, and it's moved past test phase. It is something we've implemented. I believe we're up to about 50 drivers in that program right now, and the plan is to expand that in with great speed and great numbers.
Averitt also heard from its shipper customers that many of them have had to move to rail or even air for certain shipments due to backlogs in trucking.
I don't think any shipper ever really wants to have to resort to air freight. I mean, obviously there's certain commodities, high value pharmaceuticals that maybe lend itself, or chips, would be another thing. But a lot of customers did have to go the air freight mode just because they couldn't wait any longer. Their products they had to have, their raw materials or their parts they had to have to conduct their business were stuck on a boat for 45 days. And, air freight became desperation. And so I think they intend to do more of that. Plus, as the cost of the moving the containers, the 40s and 20s from Asia into the U.S., as that number continued to increase at a alarmingly high rate, all of a sudden air freight wasn't quite as expensive as it may have been prior to that. So I think that was the movement to air freight, and I think many of our shippers in our survey do expect that to continue next year. Hopefully that will normalize some as hopefully the backlog clears. The backlog has not. I mean, I think there can be some. Certain segments have gotten better. Certainly, I think the U.S. domestic transportation is in better shape. But as far as the backlog into the West Coast ports, I don't believe it's any better. Some of the ships are just moving slower across the ocean, so that they're not all off the coast of LA where they add to the pollution. And then certainly some have shifted around the East Coast ports, but then we've now started to see backlogs in Charleston, Savannah. As far as intermodal side, with freight coming off the West Coast, intermodal has always been an option that many customers have used going into the Eastern U.S. A lot of those containers move from either directly from ports or from transload warehouses in LA into Chicago, Dallas, Memphis, and Atlanta. Then they enter the more domestic supply chain at that point and become LTL shipments or truckload shipments. And I think that's still a shipper's first choice. But when, sometimes they have to weigh out, do I need to put this over the road to save some transit time because the rails became backlogged? I think that many shippers would like to use the rail more when they can because it is more cost effective, on longer lengths of haul. It's just a question of how quickly do I have to have this? And what are my best options? If the rail networks are clear and truck capacity is slim to none moving out of LA, full truckload capacity, then hey, maybe rail's not a bad option. But I think what a lot of folks saw is even though they would prefer to use the rail networks were also experiencing a lot of backlogs. So in many cases, even though truck capacity was tight, that was still a better option. But certainly when you're going across country, if you have the days to give, then a smart shipper would always be smart to look at the intermodal option when they can.
As 2021 was winding down, there was some hope among shippers that demand would fall off some after the holidays. But so far in 2022, that hasn't been the case, and capacity is as tight as it's ever been.
I think that the shippers were optimistic going into the end of 2021 that once we got through Christmas, that this would clear up, and then you got Chinese New Year coming the 1st of February, so that will allow things to get caught up. But that does not appear to be the case. The U.S. imports are still coming in at more than 2 million containers a month, and that just outstrips our capacity. The ports, it's more than the ports can handle. It's more than the local dray providers can handle. It's more than the third-party warehouses and the distribution centers surrounding the ports can handle, and more than the trucking and rail networks can handle. So as long as that continues, I don't see anything changing right away. I do think that creative and innovative companies are trying to find ways to add resources as we are, but honestly, you still have this whole driver shortage. There's still 80,000 drivers short, and that number is probably growing. There are certainly new guys, new men and ladies entering the workforce, but not at the numbers needed to replace the retiring baby boomers. Then the original equipment manufacturers, the people we all buy our orders from, simply cannot keep up. One of our two major tractor vendors cut our order by 30% this year, and they certainly didn't want to do it. They didn't want to make 30% less sales to us and deliver 30% more tractors, but they couldn't get the parts. They could not get the parts. A lot of it is the chips needed on the tech side, but it's other components as well. And so we're working through that. We saw also our costs continue to increase on our equipment. Our trailer manufacturers cannot supply our demand. So it's unfortunately, I think it's definitely more of the same through minimum the first 6 months. And I would really think, most experts predict, and we tend to agree, all of 22 is going to be likely more of the same. So it's going to be another year of tight capacity, probably raising rates. And, I think customers are going to need to be more innovative in how they look at things, as in, shifting their cargo to Gulf Coast ports, East Coast ports when they can, looking at inland ports, in the core of our system, we do a lot of business with the Appalachian Regional Port near Chattanooga, or the inland port in Greer, South Carolina. That's an inland port from Charleston. You get some of that freight railed in from the ports where it can maybe bypass some of the bottlenecks that might exist right there at the port itself. So I think they're going to have to be innovative, maybe in some cases look at, if there's no dray capacity, can I get it pulled to a local warehouse? And we certainly operate our own in our port cities, and get it transloaded onto an over-the-road trailer, possibly shave some days that way. So they're going to have to be nimble and agile and innovative, I think, to try to stay ahead of it if 2022 kind of unfolds the way I think a lot of us think it will.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com, and as always, you can find the 1044 each week on CCJ's YouTube channel. And if you've got questions, comments, criticisms, or feedback, hit us up at 1044trucking@gmail.com or give us a call at 404-491-1380. Until next week, everybody stay safe.